Hi everybody. Sorry I haven't been on for a couple weeks. Just with the holidays and we were doing some traveling, I wasn't really in a place to do a recording privately, but I'm back now and I'll be back every Monday. Well, since my last video, we have entered a new year, and so I'd like to talk about this upcoming year. I've been reflecting on where I'd like to be a year from now. Like, what is something I want to accomplish? And I encourage you to think about these questions I've been asking myself. For me, I want to be less fearful in my interactions with others. And I want to become a better listener. We get a lot of our social skills from our parents. And people I know who were raised in healthy families, I've noticed that they're very good at asking questions in a conversation. Like if someone's telling them a story or just about some information, they'll ask questions to express that interest, to want to hear more. I really struggle with that, and I think it's because I was never really asked questions growing up. I struggle with this because I am so fearful in my interactions with others that I'm trying so hard. It's like I feel like I'm so nervous that I'm going to bother them or annoy them that it's hard to be dealing with those emotions and trying to manage the conversation and at the same time come up with questions I have. And what often happens to me, and I don't know if you experience this too, but I'll think about the conversation for 2 or 3 days and then I'll have questions I'd like to ask the person. It's almost like when I'm in the conversation, I'm just too fearful, I'm too afraid, I'm almost like barely keeping my head above water, trying to feel like it's okay for me to be there and these people are not being bothered by me, that I'm not able to access the mental energy to really think deeply about what they're saying. And so then a couple days later, when I'm in more of a safe space and thinking about what they said, then I realize what I'd like to hear more about. And obviously at that point, the conversation's long over. So that's what I want to work on. I want to be less fearful and I want to be a better listener. I do have interest in the things my friends tell me about, but I don't think I'm very good at expressing that interest or showing it, and I want to do better about that. I also want to stand up for myself more in my relationships and to set boundaries more effectively in my relationships. Now, I want to be clear, I don't have a goal of being a better boundary setter with a narcissist. It's impossible to set boundaries with a narcissist. Anytime I would try to set a boundary with my mother, she would do what I was asking her not to do more. And that's very normal for narcissists. They feel attacked when you set a boundary and they can't handle those emotions. And so I'm sure I've struggled with setting boundaries in other relationships because anytime I've tried to do that with my own mother, it's totally blown up in my face. So I do tend to let people walk all over me. I put up with things that are bothering me without saying anything, and I just want to be better about that. So what would you like your goals to be? They don't necessarily have to be about relationships or about the narcissist in your life or anything. Maybe you have completely other goals. Maybe you want a promotion at work. Maybe you would like to make more money. Maybe you want to buy a house or anything. And that's still relevant to this channel to me, because when you're raised by a narcissist, that affects everything. It affects how you act at your job. It affects your self-confidence, which can make it harder to get a promotion. So much of our being is affected by the abuse that we suffered. So even if it seems like your goal really doesn't have anything to do with your narcissistic mother or your narcissistic parent, part of it probably does, because you likely have effects from the abuse that you've survived that can make any goal a little bit harder to accomplish. Now, that doesn't mean you can't reach your goals, just that you have some additional obstacles, and it's good to be aware of those obstacles. I'm well into my 40s, and I can look back in my life and see so many missed opportunities to better myself because I was too afraid to take a chance. But I didn't realize I was so afraid. It's really only in the last couple years that I have come to understand how fearful I can be in many situations. And you may have other obstacles in that regard. So my first question is, a year from now, what would you like to have accomplished? The second question, which I've already kind of hit on, is what obstacles are standing in your way? Now for me, with the goals I shared, it's definitely a lack of self-confidence. I definitely suffer from imposter syndrome, and as I've mentioned, fear. I know I'm on this YouTube channel and I see comments saying I'm so brave to share my story, and I do appreciate the support and I take it to heart. I really do. But I do suffer from problems with self-confidence. I have a lot of self-doubt. It is definitely better in the last couple years than it's ever been, but I still have quite a ways to go in that. And that definitely affects how I behave and how I'm feeling when I'm interacting with friends or people that I've just met. So that's one obstacle. Imposter syndrome, if you didn't know, is basically where you feel like you're at a place that you do deserve to be, but you feel like you don't, like you're an imposter. If I can give an example, I attended a university in a pretty intensive program. It's difficult to get into the program, but I did, and also had an amazing scholarship. It was the second highest scholarship a person can achieve in that program, and I was one of the people selected for it. I made great grades. I worked on a research team, I had 2 different research teams actually, and always did well. I never had any problems. My reviews always were great. There were no exterior signs that I didn't belong there. And yet I did feel like I did not belong there. These were successful people all around me, people that were really intelligent, people that had accomplished much, and I always had this feeling that if they found out who I really was, they would want nothing to do with me. And I can't even pinpoint what it was about me that they would find out. It was just this general underlying kind of irrational feeling that I just didn't belong, and I had to make sure nobody found out. That's imposter syndrome. And I can feel that in my relationships too. If I meet somebody that's, healthy person, they've got it together, they've got a good job, they're friendly, they're warm, they love people, it's hard for me to believe that a person like that would want to be friends with me. And then when they do befriend me, I really can suffer from imposter syndrome in that relationship. And as I've mentioned, just general fear that's been instilled in me for many years through the abuse I've suffered. Now, these are big obstacles to overcome. They're not easy, but I do believe it's possible. It was really hard for me to sit down and write out these obstacles because it can seem overwhelming. I've dealt with these issues for a very long time, and that can make me feel like maybe I can't overcome them. But I'm far enough out in things with my mother. I've been no contact. Next month will actually be 3 years that I've been no contact with my mother. And really just not having that abuse in my life anymore has helped. I've made more progress in these obstacles in these past 3 years than at any other time in my life. And so I am pushing myself to trust myself, to believe in myself, and have the expectation that these obstacles aren't going to stop me from reaching those goals. So it can be challenging to admit that we have these issues, but it is important, and it's not anything to feel bad about or ashamed of, because it's not your fault. If you're here on this channel, that tells me that you're looking to grow as a person, you're looking for healing, you're looking for a better life than you've had. You want somebody to relate to as part of that journey, which is actually why I started this channel. I feel like I wish I could have had that in the earlier part of my journey when I realized my mother is a covert narcissist. There's a lot of really great YouTube channels on the subject. but none of them seem to be just raw and honest and just from a fellow survivor, just speaking to other survivors. And that seemed to be a gap that I wanted to fill. So I assume my audience are primarily people who are looking for a better life. They want to feel better. You want to do better. You want to be better. You want to be happier. And that shows strength. Narcissistic parental abuse is an extremely damaging form of abuse. And yes, it's awful and it sucks that we had to go through this. But if you're here on this channel, you're a survivor. And that's something to feel very proud of yourself for. Maybe you feel like you're going crazy at times. Maybe you feel like the pain will just never stop and how can life possibly be happy? But you're still here trying to find a way. And that shows such extreme strength and resilience. And I want you to know, if you are here listening to this, I am so proud of you. Because I know how hard it is to have that hope that things can be better. And as hard as that can be at times, you're still here, you're still living, you're still surviving, and it is going to get better. You have overcome so much already that you probably don't realize you have. So list those challenges and believe that they are not going to be such an enormous obstacle that you won't reach your goal. The third thing to think about is how to address those challenges or obstacles. So for me, with the goals that I just shared and the obstacles that are standing in my way, it seems the best way to address those is through self-love. I'm going to focus on loving myself this year. I'm going to focus on thinking of myself as a child and loving that child. I was so unloved as a child. My childhood was very painful. And I'm going to be there for myself to fill those holes. I'm going to spend time every day thinking about positive characteristics that are a part of me and appreciating who I am. And that's easier said than done when you're in our shoes. It's like the very obstacles I'm trying to overcome are also obstacles to the path I'm using to overcome them. You know, this lack of self-confidence, the imposter syndrome, the fear, that can all make it hard to love yourself. But I'm going to push through those fears. I'm going to read. I'm going to write some poetry that helps me. It's actually something very new I've been getting into. I'm just going to find ways to work through those feelings and trust that I will get through them. And I will learn to love myself more. And as I do, I'm going to feel better about myself. And then I'm going to have more confidence. I'm going to have less fear. And ultimately feel like less of an imposter. The next step, if you can, is to talk to somebody you trust about your goals. I think this is really important, but I also understand and acknowledge that with the audience that I'm talking to, that might not be something you're able to do right now. Because we suffer in our social skills and we suffer in our relationships, we tend to tolerate a lot of negative treatment from people and not really see it, that maybe you don't have someone right now you trust enough to share this with. And I don't want to push you or make you feel pressured to go out with somebody that you think maybe you can trust, and then you talk about these very personal, painful things and have that blow up in your face. If you don't have somebody that you really trust to talk about these things with, then don't. But if you do, go to that person and talk about what you're trying to accomplish and what you feel is in the way. And if they're a true friend or perhaps a family member, just whoever they are, they're going to speak into your life in a way that will help you. Let them assure you. Let them share their perspectives. In fact, I've shared with a couple of friends of mine recently about how fearful I am, and they were very surprised. So they may not even know, even if they know you well. We can be so good at hiding these things. They don't even know. And so, again, if you have someone that you really know you could trust with something this sensitive, talk to them about it and see if there's a way that they can assist you. For example, for me, the things I'm working on are in my interactions with people. So if I don't seem like I'm listening well enough, if I'm coming across to them like I don't have interest, then I've asked the people in my life that I really trust to tell me that, so that I know that I'm making them feel that way. Because what I did was I just expressed that I worry that I make people feel like I'm not as interested in them. And I have had people tell me that before, that I can come across that way, at times anyway, in conversation. So I know that's an issue I struggle with. It's not that I do not have the interest, but when I'm speaking to people, I might come across as though I don't. So I've got some trusted people in my life who are going to help me with that. When I'm being that way, they can point it out to me, and that can help me practice better skills. And that's going to help me in all of my relationships and help me have more trusted relationships in my life, which will also then help with the self-confidence and the fear and the imposter syndrome. I want to emphasize the importance of seeking professional help if you can. And I do understand that not everyone has access to this resource. Definitely, if you have a parent who is a narcissist, only see a therapist who is trained and knowledgeable about narcissistic parental abuse. If you go to a therapist who does not have that knowledge, not only will it not be helpful, it can actually be very damaging. That is not always easy to find, and unfortunately, that may involve a therapist that's not in your insurance network, if you're in the United States anyway. I completely understand that people may be in a position that they truly cannot afford to see a therapist, but you'd be surprised at how many are out there that have sliding scales. I started to see a therapist a little over a year ago, and she does have a sliding scale. That was a big help. There were times I had to take a break for a few months because the finances were too tight. She was always very understanding. So don't necessarily decide right away, oh, there's no way I can afford to see a therapist, because you never know who might be out there, and it's worth a try. It can be so helpful to talk to somebody who is trained in this, to just help you understand yourself more and identify the problems that you're struggling with. Whatever you do, whatever your goals are, whatever the obstacles are, be patient with yourself. I struggle with this a lot. As I shared with a trusted friend the goals I have for myself this year, I said, I've had these problems for a while now, and I thought I would be further along with these things than I am, and I'm very frustrated with that. But they said, it took over 40 years of abuse and damage that you endured to cause these problems, and you're not going to get over them in 6 months or a year. And that was some really good insight. Be patient with yourself. If you're on this channel, you're probably an adult, because it takes that long to put the pieces together on what has happened to us. You have suffered a severe form of abuse for a long time. And it may seem hopeless to feel better, to get better, or to be better, but I promise you it's not. Just be patient. It's going to take time. The journey can be difficult, but it is worth it. And I can say that because even though I'm only partially into my journey, being 3 years into it, I am doing so much better overall, and I remind myself of that. I have come a long way. I just can't undo 4 decades of damage in 3 years. It takes longer, but the rewards have been so substantial so far, and I know they'll continue to be, and I'm sure they will be for you. Love yourself. Be patient with yourself. It's gonna get better. I promise. It gets better. So what are your goals? If you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to share them in the comments. And if you need some advice or insight from someone who understands, I'm happy to chat with you. I'll see you next week. And remember, to all my fellow survivors, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are beautiful, whether your mom sees that or not.